Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well, healthy and happy. Although it is getting tougher and tougher, it has to be said, to be happy or content about anything in this world right now, doesn't it? Because it's going to hell in a handbasket, and there are a lot of folks that are taking it there intentionally. And there are also a lot of folks that are doing it unintentionally as well. What is going on in this world of ours? You know, a lot of folks have asked me to talk about this stuff that has happened geopolitically in the last 24 hours, and I'm not going to do that. I mean, I've done that in small part on other social media platforms, but really I'm kind of pulling back from all of this, to be honest with you, because I don't think there's a future for a lot of these social media platforms like Facebook or Twitter, really. So this intense censorship that we're seeing, things that are not allowed to be discussed anymore and whatever, all of this is making me far more hesitant to, have too big of a cyber footprint, let's say, out there. But at the same time, there's another thing at play as well, and that is that just talking about the problems is to deal merely with the symptoms and not the actual root cause of why the state of chaos is prevalent everywhere. You know? What is the root cause? Well, put simply in a nutshell, you have the problem of egotistical, narcissistic, dangerously out of control individuals who genuinely have this deep-seated malevolence in them. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about where this comes from. But it's also important to recognize that these people use something called glamour, right? These, whether it's the political puppets or the folks that are in power in a real sense as well, right? They all use glamour. To be glamorous. It's interesting that in today's terminology, this actually means something good, right? Which it's an inversion, as it always is in most of these cases, with the root and true meaning of the word. What is glamour? There's a difference between glamour and charisma. Okay, it's fundamental that people grasp this point. You see, glamour, people who have glamour, the power of glamour, let's call it, are looking to instill fear in other people. They intimidate other people. They're intimidating people. Okay? And so what happens is, people around them mistake that fear for respect. Now, Machiavelli, of course, talked about this. Is it better to be feared or loved? Now, you know, the tyrannical leader, the tyrant, prefers to strike fear into the hearts of his people or in the hearts of other people, right? That's just the way it is. Unfortunately, with these people, they have this natural affinity and gift for being able to intimidate other folks, to make them fearful, because that's how they get their jollies, right? Now, charisma is different. To have charisma is to have the ability to lift other people up. Okay, I'll bet they never taught you that. Okay, to be a charismatic leader. And again, this word is too often misused, right? Again, folks mistake glamour for charisma. This happens all the time, right? The charismatic individual is able to instill a sense of true confidence in other people, to make them believe that they are on an equal footing to themselves. And if the charismatic individual has done something that is remarkable, then he makes that person that he's instilling with charisma, right, that confidence, believe the same thing. That's charisma. Glamour doesn't do that. Glamour seeks to pull people down. Now, when you see somebody who has the attributes of charisma, you should try and learn from that person. But when you see someone who has the attributes of glamour, okay, or the power of glamour more properly, then you have to be very, very careful with that person. You might even want to think about avoiding that person entirely, because the chances are they will be narcissistic, they will be egotistical, and quite possibly on the verge of being a psychopath. Right? Now, I'm not joking about this, I'm deadly serious. So the glamorous person, that kind of persona that gets its kicks from seeing other people afraid of them, is the type of person that most of these political puppets out there are. And the same goes for their masters as well. It's kind of like sadism taken to an extreme. Okay, or psychic vampirism, you could call it, I suppose. But that's what it's all about. Now, it's these very same lunatics, because they're egotistical, because they're narcissistic, who end up making the worst of decisions. Why is that? Well, because, like I talked about before, they have this sense of intellectual arrogance. Okay, they mistake the possible intellect they have, or may not have actually in many cases, for wisdom. Okay, intelligence and wisdom are two different things. I've already covered this. So, what ends up happening is, because of their own ego that's out of control, and I'll talk about why their ego gets out of control in the way it does a little bit later on, but because of that, they end up having a false belief that they are in some way superior, even though this may not actually be the case in any real, tangible sense. Okay, in fact, people with that kind of superiority complex never learn. They never learn that there are actually other people that are better than them in whatever arena or field they choose to deal in. Okay? You see, the concept of being better than someone is relative. You can only be better than another person. It doesn't exist of its own right, in its own right. Okay, it doesn't exist. What does it mean to be better? They used to teach these things in school, you know. Good, better, best, right? How do these things apply, and when do they apply? And, you know, it's basic language skills, but actually it has a deeper purpose as well, because you can apply it psychologically. You can apply it philosophically. So this is the key thing. There is no better in any true definitive sense. You're not truly better than anyone else at all. But this superiority complex leads to these people, these narcissists, these egotists, these people with the power of glamour, to see other people as inferior to them. And what happens is, because we are stupefied and to some degree mystified by their power of glamour, we mistake that glamour for charisma, right? Charisma is a positive attribute. Glamour is a negative attribute, if you want to think of it in those terms. Okay, I'm just simplifying, perhaps oversimplifying slightly, but I'm simplifying for you guys. So, when you do that, when that happens, then voters, for example, overwhelmingly vote in the glamorous candidate. That's why these people, you know, always want to look good on TV. You see what I'm saying? And the other big question is, why does their ego get out of control? This happens because they're told constantly and with consistency that any successes that have happened in their life were the result, and only the result, of their actions. Okay? understand that a second. You see, very few people will tell you what makes a person successful. And again, success, by the way, is also relative. And that's something else folks won't tell you. You can only measure it against other people, be it financial success or whatever else. Obviously, the most important thing in life is not to go hungry. Okay? Not to be in abject poverty to a degree where you don't have food to eat, you don't have clothes to wear, that sort of thing, which does happen, sadly, in certain places. But beyond that, right, the notion that, you can become successful because you have more numbers after, or more zeros after whatever numbers in your bank account is nonsense. But it's a nonsense a lot of these people who are egotistical, narcissistic, and glamorous believe in. And they also end up trying to fill the inner void that they have with things. And then they try and go after other people's things. You'll notice that as well, which is why they love government so much. It's why they end up gravitating towards politics, probably that and their own inner desire for psychopathic action. But these folks, they have this wish to encroach into other people's territories, into their homes, into their, you name it, into their bank accounts and take from them. Just so that they can see more zeros added to their numbers in their bank accounts. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is what you're dealing with. And it's these people that are creating the problems. And they're told constantly that any success that they've attained is due to them. That's a nonsense. That's a lie. That's a falsehood. Okay? Any success is not purely due to you. There's a myriad of circumstances that have to go completely the right way for you to be successful in whatever you're successful in. You can increase the chances of that. Okay, you can increase the chances of that depending on what you do, but success itself is not down only and solely to you. It takes, a lot of people to make somebody successful, or to make something successful. A brand, let's say. Okay, it's not just the CEO. Although perhaps the CEO, if they're very creative, has a greater input or whatever, and it's quite correct that that person gets the proper remuneration for whatever it is they've put into, in terms of effort. But that doesn't mean that success was only down to that individual. Okay? It never means that. You can't be successful without other people. Right? Even your enemies, actually, in a strange sort of way. It's a very bizarre thing. You can't be successful if you don't have enemies. Because you can only, like I said, you can only measure success against other people. Do you see what I'm saying? Anyway, we'll put that aside for a second. So, because that happens, the person's ego gets inflated to a point where they don't understand the value of other human beings. Okay, and so with that overinflated ego, that develops into narcissism. Okay, although narcissistic traits, it has to be said, can exist even without that egotism to some degree, but you usually find that the two go hand in hand. And the narcissism becomes more displayed, right? Because they fall in love completely with themselves, thinking that they are it. Okay, and egotism and narcissism, by the way, they exist in everyone. This is another thing I'd like to talk about very quickly, which is that a lot of people will tell you a little bit of this stuff, right? But they won't tell you that these traits are also dormant, perhaps, or active in your own psyche, in your own being. That part they won't even touch with a barge pole. You see, everyone has that. Okay? The question really is whether you can keep it in control or not, because it's a wild rabid animal. And it's also the direct road to your own ruin. Okay? Because what happens is, see, people with that kind of personality, people with those kinds of characters or character traits, end up trying to make the external world fit their own subjective worldview. Okay? And it doesn't work. Then they try to create external order. Instant external order. Because everything around them just falls to pieces. It falls into total chaos. They can't make it work. Why not? Because they have the wrong worldview. But they don't know that. Right? So they try to impose order. And again, that's another reason why they're attracted to government, right? They try to get instant order out of chaos, whilst they themselves are in spiritual turmoil. Okay? That's what's going on in the dynamic. And of course you can't do that. It's the most idiotic thing you can do. Right? And there's a lot of people, it has to be said, as an aside, I've noticed a lot of people try to self-initiate in the mystical traditions. And that's a very dangerous thing to do, because that's doing the same thing. You're probably suffering from the same problems, right? Of thinking that you can create instant order out of chaos when you yourself are in spiritual turmoil. You haven't probably addressed any of the existential crisis you're having. You have no conception of who you are or what you are. And like I say, it's only going to lead you down a path of self-destruction, self-annihilation. Don't do it. Okay? The people that get initiated into mystical traditions and the mystery schools, it takes them years to try and master themselves. Okay? It takes them years to try and master themselves. This is another quick point I'd like to make. Everyone with a sane mind acknowledges that they don't want a master above them, except, people who have been conditioned into psychopathy, right? They don't mind having masters above them, provided they can actually also have slaves below them, right? But the sane-minded individual goes, okay, I don't want any masters above me. But see that second part we were talking about, not having slaves below you? They forget that part. They forget it. And so what happens is that they want to have people below them. They want to treat others as inferior, as their subjects, as their slaves. They just view people as accessories or, something to be used and sometimes abused. This is a big problem. This is, the political philosophy, the doctrine of anarchy. Okay? Somebody asked me about this recently. They said, do you believe in anarchy? And I thought, that's a very strange question. Why would I believe in anything? It doesn't make sense. A lot of people have asked me this, and it's like, hold on a second here. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? What type of anarchy are you talking about? Are you talking about anarcho-communism, which is an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms? Right? And if you're not talking about anarcho-communism, then are you talking about straight-out anarchy, which is the notion that there should be no masters above you, right? But again, anarchists today forget that there shouldn't be any slaves below you either. Right? That's the thing. So are you talking about the type of anarchy where you have no masters but it's okay to have slaves? Okay, these are the ideological pitfalls out there, but folks don't see that, right? They can't see it. Or are you talking about the type of anarchy in which you have established inner order within yourself, and then you seek to understand how the world can be brought into external order through your own inner peace, if you will? Because if it's the last part, if it's the last definition, then I'm on board with that. But if it's the other two definitions, you can go to hell. Okay? This reminds me of something else. And this is quite an important thing I'd like to share as well. There are people out there that have the power of glamour, that have an ego that is out of control, right? Who are egotistical, who have narcissistic tendencies, that are probably psychopathic at some level, who come to you and appear to ask questions of you, about you, in a what seems like an inquisitive manner. Okay, this will happen. Because I've met a lot of people. See, these kind of people I can recognize a mile off now, right? Because over the years, you meet enough of them and you go, hang on a second. I know what you're all about now, mate, right? You meet these people and, as I say, they at first appear inquisitive, but actually what they're trying to do is to trip you up. Okay, is to trip you up and to make you look like a stupid fool. Okay, now you can see this best exemplified in the interview that Kathy Newman had with Jordan Peterson. But there are a lot of these kinds of people, men and women. Okay? A lot of them. And so they try and get you in a gotcha moment. That's what's going on in them, right? They don't really want to learn. They don't really want to understand anything. They're not actually looking for you to teach them something or to impart something that you might know, or perhaps even they might have something to teach you. No. That's not what's going on there. What's happening is that person with the narcissistic tendencies, with the egotism, is looking to trip you up, make you look like a fool so they can laugh at you out of a smug sense of superiority. You have to be very careful of those people. So the moment I see somebody exhibiting those traits, I am going to run a million miles away. Okay? The same thing's true of people that talk about, this nonsense about patriarchy. And all this other garbage that they've had pumped into their heads, this ideology, these belief systems. Same thing happens there. So, you have to steer clear of people. Don't let people like that into your life or even to make an entrance into your sphere. Okay? Your own inner circle. Don't let them come into that, because these people are like a whirlwind. They come in and they cause havoc and chaos and destruction, and they will leave you damaged. Okay, they get off on seeing that damage in other people. Like I said, it's how they get their jollies, right? It's how they get their kicks. So beware of that. But the other thing about these kind of idiots, and they are idiots, make no mistake about that, is that they actually mistake processes for beliefs. Now, a lot of people won't get that. What do you mean by that? What I mean is that these idiots mistake natural processes or mental processes as being a part of some belief system. They create religions out of ideas. Okay, they create religions out of ideas. And what happens over time is that they become confident about those beliefs. And when an idiot becomes confident, or rather a whole series of idiots become confident, the world itself is in danger. Okay, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing today, because idiots are ruling the roost. Do you understand what I'm saying? The idiots are running, the lunatics are running the asylum. The idiots are in charge. And the difference between these type of idiots, as I say, they are intellectually arrogant. They have this smug sense of superiority. The difference between them and a wise person is that a wise person is constantly hesitant. You see, he or she considers whether what they are doing is truly a moral good or not. Okay? But a fool has absolute confidence. You know, and these are the types of people that end up causing the type of havoc in the world that we are seeing today, right? These people have no sense of, they have no true sense of self. They haven't addressed the real existential questions within themselves. So the question becomes then, from that, branching off from that, that we touched upon it in the previous video. Who are you? What are you? There are a few ways to answer that question, and they would be correct ways to answer it. One is that you are an expression of the universe. Okay, that sounds pretty poetic, but actually, in physics, it's a reality. Okay, you know, you hear this stuff, oh, you're all made of stars and all this business. Well, there's an element of truth to that, right? Because you came from the same place as the origin of the universe. You are a part of it. Okay, you're a part of it, because everything that makes you who you are, certainly in a physical sense, you know, comes from the very same source. Okay? But also, a deeper truth is this. And I've been in two minds about whether to share this or not, because like I said, there's a lot of ignorant people out there, and they might not understand this properly. But I'll do my best to explain it correctly. You see, you are in a state of existing and not existing at precisely the same time, okay, simultaneously. You're in a state of existing and not existing. You are, and at the same time, you are not. Now, this is known as a paradox, okay? And it's this paradox which allows life to actually exist. All instances of life are due to this paradox. To put it simply, nothingness, which is what everything came from, nothingness demands something exist. Okay, nothingness demands something exist. What I've just told you, and what I'm also about to tell you, is the biggest occult secret that you will ever have dropped on your heads. Every major secret society knows this. Its adepts at the highest levels are taught this. Okay? Every mystery school and every tradition in these mystery schools has taught this. Now, as a result of knowing that, two things happened. There's a group of people in this world, let's say, and I'm oversimplifying here, again, I know this, but it's necessary for brevity. There's a group of people who worship the void. Okay? There's a group of people who worship the void. And then there are those who understand the power of creation. And they like creation. Okay? The thing is, at the core of our being as human beings, as people, at some level, we've probably worked out, maybe subconsciously, I don't know, but we have probably worked out that we came out of the void. And by the way, this is talked about even in biblical scriptures. Okay, it's talked about in the ancient texts that existed in Sumerian times. It's talked about everywhere. This is not something new as such that I'm telling you. It's just that I'm helping you to understand that better, because that's glazed over. You know, the religions of today won't teach that. At some level, we all know we came out of the void, right? And what happens in certain people is that there's a deep-seated desire to return to the void. For them, there is only the void, because that is the ultimate, the absolute truth, the ultimate truth. And they're correct in that respect, right? We began in the void, we're going to go back to the void. This is nihilism 101, basically, right? But it's wrong. On a human level, it's wrong. Okay, can you guess why? Well, those of you that have been with the channel from the beginning probably will. But for the newcomers, the answer is this. You are a human being. You have a finite lifespan. Therefore, your focus should only be on your own lifespan, not what happens 4 trillion years down the line. Because you won't be around. And it's quite possible your descendants won't be around, because the earth will have burned to a crisp and the sun will have burned out, okay? So, you know, this kind of... that's not where your focus should be. That's not where your vision should be. Okay? That's what makes the nihilists wrong. And this is the thing. And it's the nihilists, it's the people that worship the void that are members of the circle of the black sun that I've talked about, okay? This is who the heavy hitters are. They want to go back to the void. But it's not enough just for them to go back to the void. They want to drag all of creation with them into the void. Back into nothingness. They believe, I've said this before publicly, I haven't explained it in this much detail though. They believe in nothingness, right? I said that numerous times. This is what I'm talking about. They believe only the void is true and all else is an illusion. And they're wrong. They are wrong in that. Okay, because all else isn't an illusion. It's only an illusion to a mind that's disconnected completely from living, quite honestly. It's a mind that's totally disconnected from living that thinks in those kind of twisted ways. Now, sometimes what happens is you'll experience tragedy just as a normal human being. You'll experience some kind of cataclysm or a cataclysmic event, perhaps. A loved one might pass away or something might happen that really kind of jars you and discombobulates you. And you might end up giving into that same kind of despair. Okay? But you must never ever use that, the death of someone or a horrific catastrophe, right? These words, sometimes I have all the trouble in the world with them, but you must never use that kind of catastrophe as an excuse. Do you understand what I'm saying? You must never use that as an excuse to give in to total despair. You must never use it as an excuse to destroy yourself. Because you're a valuable human being. It's just that at that moment, right after you've experienced shock and trauma or whatever else, maybe you don't feel it. Maybe, people have stopped you from knowing that. Maybe you feel alone in the world. Those are all normal emotions, normal reactions. But don't forget that in a very real sense, you're not alone in this world. You're interconnected with every other living being. Not in some sort of this new age nonsense. See, the New Agers put this garbage out there. Oh, we're all one gelatinous mass, and we are all one, and we are the world. That's not true, not remotely true. It's stupid to believe that, okay? But we are interconnected with all life forms. Plants, animals, people, even rocks. weird as that sounds, right? There are things happening within each of these seemingly solid objects and subjects, let's say, right? These organisms. There are things happening within the living organisms, certainly, that are mysterious in nature at the cellular level, at the atomic level, at the subatomic level. There are all kinds of very strange things going on in them. And there is reason to believe, because of entanglement, that unbeknownst to ourselves consciously, we're probably having effects on the rest of the world in ways that we don't know fully, just by the virtue of being. Okay? It's fascinating stuff. Anyway, I don't want to confuse you too much. So, I guess the point of what I just said there is that, in a very real sense, the answers to your questions are within yourself. Okay? Last week, I told a young woman to look within herself for answers, and she said, "But I don't know anything." So I said, "Do you think I know anything?" Most of the time, I'm talking out of my ass, right? In general life, right? I'm probably talking out of my ass. When I'm supposed to know something, I'll know it. And when you're supposed to know something, you'll know it. That's just the way it works out in this world of ours, So it's important, as I say, to approach life with wisdom. And I think one of the other great problems we've got right now is that the schooling systems are a mess. And also, teaching is a mess. And I've talked about this in depth. I've talked about how the education system was created and what it's become, and the state-run education system is just a tool for indoctrination, right? But if you were to go back a few hundred years, or 1,000 years, or many thousands of years ago, you would see that being a teacher was a very serious business, and the people that were teaching then understood this. The people that were true teachers understood this. You're entrusted with the responsibilities of a father, a mother, a guide, and a shaman. Okay? And if that sounds weird to you, you need to go and look up how people originally were taught things. Most of the time, actually, in many cultures, they were taught by their parents. Okay, but there were village elders and so on that also acted as teachers and guardians. One key thing about teaching and teachers in general, okay, and this is important that we completely take this on board. There's a lot of people out there, and I talked about this in one of the previous videos I put up just a few weeks ago. Actually, I think it was last week, if I'm not mistaken. That there are a lot of people in various, whatever you want to call it, movements or communities or whatever else, right? Especially online, that want to tell you that there's something wrong with humanity. Okay, that you're all bad students. Okay, that it's all your fault. Everything that's going wrong in this world is your fault. That's what they want to teach you. And they call themselves spiritual teachers. They don't know jack shit. Okay? I'm telling you that. They don't know fuck all. Right? If that's what they're saying. They're just posing as some kind of spiritual teacher. Sadly. Because they probably have their own agenda at some level. Or they're just ignorant of the fact that it's not the fault of human beings today. Okay, it's like, let me give you an analogy, right? An analogous scenario. It's a little bit like saying the cow is responsible, or the sheep is responsible for being butchered by the butcher, by the guy running the abattoir. Okay, the animal is responsible for getting its head cut off. That makes no logical sense whatsoever. It's the one wielding the blade. Okay? It's the one wielding the blade. Who's wielding the blade above the head of humanity? See, they won't talk about none of that, right? Because that's scary territory when you start to expose the real truth about what the hell's going on, which I've done. That's why it scares the absolute crap out of them all. You know? And there are a lot of people like me out there doing that, by the way. It's just there aren't enough of us. But it's not humanity's fault. Okay? It's not the average human being's fault that the things are rapidly going in the direction that they are. You know? My point in saying all of this is that there is no such thing as a bad student. There are only bad teachers. Okay? There are only bad teachers. It's a little bit like, it's just the same as how there are no bad children. Now, this shocks people. You know, if you say there's no bad students, there's no bad children, people think you're some sort of utopian loon, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to explain to you that if a student does not learn well, then it is the teacher's fault, at some level at least, for not explaining it properly. Or maybe that teacher just can't understand that student or explain to that student. Maybe they need a different teacher. Okay, but there's no such thing as a bad student. And there's no such thing as a bad child. Okay, there's only bad parents. Human beings that are not just bad, but evil, let us say in particular, end up evil as a result of bad parenting. Full stop. Okay? Full stop. They're not born evil. Nobody's born. See this garbage that's taught. Oh, you're born evil. You're not born evil. You're born with the ability and the capacity to do good or to do evil. Okay? But for the most part, most people are born good. You know, and this nonsense that's peddled, even by people that are supposed to be learned, about original sin, which they've carried into their teachings and their lectures. Lunacy. Because that's what's at the heart of a lot of this false teaching. You know? And this is why you have to be careful who you choose as a teacher. And you have to be especially careful of teachers who choose you. You see, a teacher that's worth their weight in gold probably will shun you before they really start teaching you. Did you know that? Of course you didn't. Why would you, right? Nobody's told you that. Okay? The teachers that are worth their salt will shun you. Because they don't know if you're ready to learn what they have to teach or not. They'll be looking for proof that you're willing to learn. You know, because a true teacher doesn't want sycophantic followers. This goes back to that thing we were talking about, glamour and charisma. Okay? The charismatic individual doesn't want sycophantic followers. The glamorous individual does. You know? So you've got to take that into account as well. But one final thing I'll say before I close this video off, it's not all doom and gloom by any stretch of the imagination, okay? It's really not. The thing is, right now, evil is prevalent, ignorance is prevalent, and tyranny is prevalent. That is all true. But you have to remember and you have to understand that all things go in cycles. Okay? You see, according to Hindu mythology, and I'm just using one Eastern mystic philosophy as an example, there are Western analogous mythologies, if you will. But according to Hindu mythology, when evil grows and the armies of darkness spread across the earth, as they currently are doing, Shiva, the destroyer, descends to kill the malevolent. Okay? And because they're malevolent, because human beings have turned so malevolent, Durga, which is the feminine creative force, becomes enraged and transforms into Kali. Okay? And in that transformation, Kali becomes uncontrollable. Her bloodlust becomes uncontrollable. And there's a very important lesson in this. I guess this story, this allegory, is a lesson to teach the ignorant ones, the idiots out there that are causing the trouble. The lesson is this, for those people that want to harm all of humanity. You enrage the divine at your own peril. Okay, and this is what these people are doing, and they do not recognize it, they do not realize it. This is the power of creation. Okay, you enrage the divine at your peril because it always, without exception, creates an equally powerful but opposing wrathful force. And that force shows no mercy. Okay? It's important to understand that as well. One interesting aside, and I'll probably do a whole presentation on this maybe in the future at some stage, is that the mythology of Shiva, whilst in the true holistic Hindu texts and the Vedas and so on, was designed to encapsulate some very, very important ideas. Like with all things, the Hindu mythologies have been flipped on their head as well by these same, let's call them satanic forces. Okay, just like they did with Christianity, with liberation theology in the Roman Catholic Church. They started spreading this communist dogma. Okay, just like they did with Islam, where they subverted that and turned that into what they did. Just like they did with Judaism, where they started propagating Talmudic Judaism, right, and replaced authentic Judaism with that. Just like they've done with all of these traditions, they did the same thing with Hindu mysticism. Okay, and that's a presentation all of its own, probably, that I'll have to talk about. And this is part of the reason, the satanic elements, if you will. These are the people that worship the void, right, that I was talking about. These people have created their own brand of dark Hinduism. And this is part of the reason why you see that symbology, the inverted symbology, inverted Hindu symbology, incorporated into their properties, what they own, what they take over, in their branding, in their advertising. You'll see it everywhere. The Nazis, by the way, were just an extension. If you recall how they turned the swastika into what it was, right? It started as the swatika, which is a revered Hindu symbol. Then they inverted it, yeah, and they made that into their banner. Okay, so there's a lot to this stuff. It's not just, but the Soviet Union did the same thing with the hammer and sickle. I asked people some time ago now if they, knew where that came from and to maybe look into that. A lot of people still haven't got back to me or told me what that symbol was supposed to represent. You really need to find out. And now I will tell you at some stage if you haven't figured it out already. But a lot of these symbologies were taken out of ancient traditions. and inverted and changed and made it into what they wanted them to be, what they wanted to represent. You know? Anyway, I'll leave it there for this video, and I'll hopefully speak to you all soon. But I want you to take very good care of yourselves. Thank you very much for watching, and God bless every one of you.